Hi guys, welcome back to my channel. If you're new and you like to hear about opinions, reviews, analyses, and ramblings on films, books, and TV shows, be sure to click that subscribe button for more content from me. Today we're doing book talk, my thoughts, reactions, and reviews on a book that was on my TBR. Today's book talk is on The Final Girl Support Group by Grady Hendrix. So this month's videos are spooky season themed, so the vibes are gonna be great. I was in Paris like a couple of weeks ago, and I did spend some time in some cemeteries and catacombs to like really get in the vibe. So let's get into like this book. So The Final Girl Support Group. So this book has been on my TBR for like over a year now. I was intrigued by the title and the plot summary, and this is also my first Grady Hendrix novel. So I have heard great things about him, but I didn't really have the time to read this book until I was sitting down at Montparnasse Cemetery. So yeah. So what is The Final Girl Support Group about? So it's told in the first person point of view of Lynette Tarkington, and it follows the life of a final girl after the films and the sequels have ended. So just as like a quick educational moment, what is a final girl? So a final girl is a character, typically a woman, in a horror film, slasher film, like those kinds of films, who is like the last character standing, and again typically it's a woman. So they're the final survivor of all the horrors, the massacres, what have you. So I was intrigued by this book because like on one hand, like we do see some of the PTSD that final girls like Sydney Prescott and Laurie Strode like suffer in their respective franchises, but on the other hand, those final girls don't have other final girls to rely on like in those franchises. So I think that's what's really cool that Grady Hendrix did, was having multiple final girls in one book and having them be friends with each other, or at the very least like be in a support group together. And so like the main conflict in this book is that someone is hunting down the members of the final girl support group, and they have to figure out who it is, and you know, they gotta survive. So overall, like this book is just a huge rec for me, especially if you're a fan of slasher films. So this book is dark. Like, guys, final girls, horror films, yeah, it's dark. And yes, it's dark, but it's also comedic, and it pays homage to the like favorite slasher franchises of all time. We've got Scream, Friday the 13th, Halloween, Nightmare on Elm Street, Texas Chainsaw Massacre, and even like the lesser known Silent Night, Deadly Night series. So I am not kidding about the homage and the over references, because as soon as Lynette, the main character, explains how each of these girls became a final girl, like horror film fans would recognize instantly the franchise that each like final girl like pays homage to. So something I didn't really realize until I finished reading the book was that a few of the final girls in this book, whose story was inspired by a franchise, was named after an actress from that franchise. So here's an example. I'll actually list them all for you. So in Friday the 13th, Adrienne King, the actress, plays Alice, who is the final girl from the first film. And, Adrienne in the book was the final girl of a camp massacre. All right. Then we've got Texas Chainsaw Massacre. We have Marilyn Burns, who played Sally Hardesty, the final girl from the first film. Marilyn in the book was the final girl who survived a family of bloodthirsty cannibals. Then we've got Nightmare on Elm Street. Heather Langenkamp played Nancy Thompson, the final girl from the first film, and Heather in the book was the final girl who survived the Dream Killer. Pretty sure, yeah, you couldn't name him like Freddy or something close enough to Freddy, because that's just, copyright issues. And then we've got Scream. So Neve Campbell played Sydney Prescott, who was the final girl for the franchise until the 5th and 6th films. And then we've got Julia in the book, whose boyfriend and boyfriend's friend wanted to turn her into a final girl, and her last name is Campbell. So also just a side note, I met Neve Campbell at Fan Expo this year. Oh my god, she's so sweet, so lovely. Definitely one of my favorite final girls. So anyway, back to my review. So just this homage like that Grady Hendrix said, like I think it's just a really cool like thing to do. And you know, like these slasher films that I mentioned, I consider them to be like classics. Like they're embedded in pop culture for a reason, that even if you haven't seen any of these films, you know like who the killers are, you know the stories, because that's how embedded it is in our pop culture. So the entire story is like a wild ride. But then I was reading it and I'm just like, aren't horror films essentially like a wild ride? So that being said, like I mentioned already, this book is dark and there is a lot of blood and violence in this book. So just be wary if you're a little bit on the squeamish side, okay? So Lynette, she is an absolutely crazy protagonist, all right? And there were moments when you were wondering like, what the hell are you doing, girl? And then you remember, this girl is a final girl. She saw her entire family and her boyfriend get murdered in front of her when she was 16 years old. So then you kind of start to understand why she is the way that she is and like why she reacts to certain things the way that she does. And so the whole point of this book is that these final girls, like their traumas, they have like really unhealthy ways of dealing with it. So just as a few examples, we've got Heather, who struggled with staying sober, and like Lynette, who can't move on from that event from when she was 16 years old. So like their traumas are so severe that it impacts them even years and years down the line, and like how it also impacts how they interact with other people, like Lynette especially. So this book, another interesting I wanted to mention was its format. So it is told in the traditional like narrative format, but in between chapters there are excerpts of either like news article clippings, interview transcripts, like that sort of thing, that helps you understand the final girl concept and idea better, like in the story world. So then we've got like there's movie franchises that were made exploiting these women and their stories, which also like hinders their ability to move on. And then there are also like academic studies in this story world in the book regarding like horror films. So there's like reviews and like articles on the rise of the slasher / horror genre following like these massacres and after Hollywood turns them into films. So if you're like, again, like a horror film fan or even like a film studies fan or major like I am, I feel like you'd really be interested in reading more about the horror genre, like just based on these excerpts alone, because like it makes you want to learn more, you know? So then let's move on to the plot twist. Alright, so I'm not going to deny it, some of the plot twists in this book do seem a little predictable, but the biggest one actually definitely took me by surprise, and I will admit it's because I did not do a very good close reading. Alright, because a little bit of a spoiler, but at the very beginning of the book there is an excerpt of a Reddit post, and I read it, but I didn't like closely read it, and this actually gave a very huge hint. Like after I was reading the book, I opened it back up again and I was looking through the Reddit post and I was just like, it actually gave a massive hint as to who was trying to get rid of the final girls and like the motive. So it was bonkers, but it made complete sense. Like it's crazy, but it makes sense, all right? And the plot twist, the biggest plot twist of all, I feel it is worthy of Scream, like in my opinion. So I'm gonna venture into a very spoilery territory, so if you are planning on reading this, you don't want to be spoiled, feel free to skip the next like couple of minutes, but if you are wanting to know about the spoilers, feel free to stick around. So the main thing, so there's this red herring with Chrissy, who is another final girl, but in the reasons in the book explain why she's no longer like part of the support group. But we've got Chrissy, who's another final girl, and her references when she was talking to Lynette were very like cabin in the woods for the archetype. And first off, like, love the cabin in the woods references, okay? But it is a very good red herring because that almost had me believing that Chrissy was doing the bidding of Dr. Carol, who is like the therapist of the final girl support group, until Lynette realized that the latest final girl, like this teenager named Stephanie, and Dr. Carol's son Sky were actually the ones who are hunting down the final girls and trying to kill them off. But it was like, just the way it was set up is actually so good. Like, I was on the edge of my seat. I couldn't stop reading. I'm like, I have to know. Like, these twists and these turns, and it's insane in the best possible way. So overall, I would definitely recommend reading like the Final Girl support group if you're a fan of horror films. Like, it's a really good and like easy read. It's so quick that I actually finished it in like a day or a day and a half. So my flight got canceled and delayed another 2 days, so I was literally just in cafes and cemeteries reading this book because it is so good. Honestly, like, reading a horror book in a cemetery during spooky season is a vibe. Also, and like in France too, I know some people are like, cemeteries, why? First off, famous people were buried in a lot of like cemeteries in Paris, so I was paying my respects. But also, their cemeteries were giving like park vibes, and it's not like, the only reason you know it's a cemetery is like because of all like the gravestones, like, sorry, the graves, headstones. I don't know what it's called. English is not my first language. But yeah, so you got the graves around you, but it's also very spacious. And if you obviously go during the day, there's a lot of people there. The sun was shining too, so it was just, it's a vibe. Recommend it, definitely. And also, like, I would definitely read more of Grady Hendrix's stuff. Like, after reading this book, I was like, yeah, I'm sold on him as an author. And I have one of his new books, I think. Yes, it's called How to Sell a Haunted House. It's on my TBR, and I might do a video of it in the future. So, yeah, that's a wrap on the Final Girl support group. If you've got suggestions for films, books, and TV shows, like, feel free to comment down below. My next video will be a double feature on Five Nights at Freddy's and Totally Killer on Amazon Prime, and it will be up hopefully by next week. So thank you so much for watching. Have an awesome day, and please don't forget to like, comment, or subscribe. See you guys next time. Bye.